I stood in the middle of the living room, my heart pounding in my chest as I looked at Josh. His mother, Linda, sat on the couch, arms crossed, staring at me like I was some kind of traitor. My suitcase was already packed, sitting by the door. After months of frustration, resentment, and exhaustion, I was finally leaving. So that's it. Josh's voice was hoarse, like he couldn't believe this was happening. You're really going to walk away from us? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Us? There hasn't been an us for months, Josh. There's you and your mother, and then there's me, the person who's been paying for this apartment while she sits here, doing nothing, and you refuse to do a damn thing about it. Linda scoffed. Oh, please. You act like I'm some kind of burden. I raised my son. I deserve to be close to him. That's what families do. Families contribute, I snapped back. Families respect each other. Families don't treat their son's fiancé like a maid in a walking app. I turned to Josh, my throat tightening. You let this happen. You let her take over everything. You let her push me out of my own space. You let her treat me like garbage while I was paying for her to live here. And you never once stood up for me. Josh looked torn, his hands clenching and unclenching. I didn't know what to do, he muttered. You did know, I said quietly. You just chose to do nothing. Linda rolled her eyes. Oh, stop being so dramatic. If you were a real woman, you would know how to handle this situation instead of running away like a child. I felt something snap inside me. I turned on my heel, grabbed my suitcase, and headed for the door. I'm done. You two figure out how you're paying for this place without me. I'm not your bank account anymore. As I reached for the doorknob, Josh blurted out, Wait, what am I supposed to tell my mom? I paused, looking over my shoulder. Tell her congratulations. She finally got what she wanted. And with that, I walked out, leaving them behind. When I first met Josh, I never would have imagined it would come to this. I was 29, working in tech, financially independent, and had built a life I was proud of. Josh was charming, ambitious, and, at first, he seemed like the perfect partner. We moved in together after he finished his MBA, and things were great. We split our expenses, he was supportive of my career, and I thought we were a team. Then Linda moved in. It was supposed to be temporary. She had said she just needed a couple of months to get settled, find a teaching job, and start fresh in our city. I didn't love the idea, but I agreed, thinking it would be a short-term inconvenience. I cleared out my home office so she could have her own room, moved my work setup into a cramped corner of our bedroom, and kept telling myself it was temporary. But months passed, and Linda never even applied for a job. Instead, she settled in like she owned the place. She constantly interrupted me while I was working, barged into my calls, and treated my career like it was a joke. And worse, she had these outdated ideas about gender roles. Why are you making Josh do the dishes? She'd demand. A man shouldn't have to do housework. You're so lucky he puts up with you, she'd tell me, shaking her head. Back in my day, women knew how to take care of their men. The worst part wasn't even Linda. It was Josh. At first, he'd roll his eyes at her comments, muttering, She's just old-fashioned. But then he stopped defending me altogether. He started letting her dictate things, avoiding confrontation, always choosing the path of least resistance. One night, after another argument about Linda treating me like a maid, I brought up the rent. We should be splitting this 3 ways, I told him. She's been here for months. It's not fair that I'm paying for a space I can't even use anymore. Josh hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. She doesn't have the money right now, he said. She needs time. I clenched my fists. So I'm just supposed to keep paying extra? Indefinitely? We can do 50-50, he offered weakly, as if that was some grand compromise. I stared at him, realizing just how deep I'd let myself sink into this mess. You really expect me to keep funding this while she sits here doing nothing? She's my mom, he said, like that excused everything. And I was supposed to be your partner, I whispered. That was when I knew. This wasn't fixable. I started making my exit plan. My friend Sarah was losing her roommate at the end of February, and she offered me a place to stay. I ran the numbers, and even though it would mean paying double rent for a few months, it was worth it. I refused to spend another day feeling like a guest in my own home, but I still wanted to give Josh one last chance. The weekend before I planned to move out, I sat him down. I need to know if you're willing to set boundaries with your mom, I said. If we have a future, you have to choose us, not just her. He looked at me, conflicted. I don't know, he finally said. That was all I needed to hear. Then I do, I said. I'm leaving. When I finally told Linda, she acted completely unfazed. Maybe that's for the best, she said smugly. But the next day, when she realized I had been paying most of the rent all along, her tune changed. She suddenly had the brilliant idea that we could move to a bigger apartment and she'd help by covering the price difference. If I went back to paying 2/3 of the total rent, I almost laughed in her face. I'm done being used, I told her, and I'm done with this conversation. The final straw came when she tried to guilt me into staying, saying I was taking advantage of Josh. I stared at her in disbelief. You've spent 6 months living off me for free? What exactly have I taken advantage of? We both ended up yelling at each other, saying things we couldn't take back. But for the first time, I didn't care. I moved out at the end of the month. Josh had to sign a new lease with his mom, and apparently, his dad had to step in financially to help cover the rent. Meanwhile, I was free. One night, Josh texted me, asking if we could talk. He said his mom was planning to move back home in June, and he wanted to know how long we should take a break. I told him the truth. We're not taking a break, Josh. This is over. I need someone who will have my back, and that's never going to be you. He didn't respond after that, and honestly, I didn't care. I was done carrying the weight of someone else's baggage. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I had finally moved out, leaving Josh and his mother to deal with the mess they had created. For the first time in months, I could breathe. No more walking on eggshells in my own home. No more being treated like a wallet with a pulse. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I was free. But Linda wasn't done with me. It started a week after I moved in with Sarah. I had just settled into my new space, finally feeling like myself again. I was sitting on the couch sipping coffee and scrolling through my phone when my screen lit up with a text from Josh. Josh, you really just left us to struggle, huh? I sighed, already regretting opening the message. Before I could type a response, another one came through. Josh, my mom had to ask my dad for money to cover rent. She's devastated. I hope you're happy. I clenched my jaw. Was he serious? Me. She's devastated. About what? Having to pay her own way for once? He didn't reply immediately, and I figured that was the end of it. Until later that night, when I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Hello? Silence, then a sharp inhale. You ungrateful little bitch. My stomach twisted. I didn't even need to ask who it was. Linda. I kept my voice calm, refusing to give her the reaction she wanted. I'm hanging up now. You think you're so smart, she hissed, but you're just a selfish, gold-digging whore. You used my son and then threw him away like trash. I gritted my teeth. Used him? Linda, I was paying most of the rent while you sat on your ass and did nothing. I gave Josh every chance to stand up for me. He didn't. That's not my problem anymore. You ruined his life, she screeched. He's miserable. You destroyed everything for him. Do you even care? Or were you just waiting for an excuse to leave? I exhaled slowly, gripping my phone tighter. If he's miserable, it's because he let you control every aspect of his life. If you really cared about him, you'd let him grow up instead of clinging to him like a parasite. Silence. Then, you'll regret this, she whispered. You'll see. I ended the call and blocked her number. But the next morning, I woke up to a barrage of texts from Josh. Josh, why did you tell my mom she's a parasite? Josh, I get that you're mad, but she's my mother. Show some respect. Josh, this is why things didn't work out between us. You never cared about my family. I was so furious I almost dropped my phone. Me, your mother called me in the middle of the night to scream at me. She called me a whore, Josh. Are you okay with that? He read the message. Didn't respond. Typical. I tried to move on, but Linda wasn't finished. 2 weeks later, Sarah and I went out for dinner. I was finally starting to relax, feeling like my old self again. We were laughing over drinks when Sarah suddenly froze, staring over my shoulder. Uh, don't look now, but we've got company. I turned and my stomach dropped. Linda. She was standing by the entrance, eyes locked on me, lips pressed into a thin line. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered. She stormed toward our table, her heels clicking loudly against the floor. You think you can just run away, she spat. You think you can ruin my son's life and pretend we don't exist? I set my drink down carefully. Linda, this is pathetic. You need to leave. People were starting to stare. She ignored them, leaning closer. You humiliated him, she hissed. He loved you and you destroyed him. You destroyed us. I scoffed. Us? Linda, there was never an us. There was you trying to control him and me trying to have a normal relationship. You were never supposed to be part of it. Her face turned red. You bitch, she seethed. Sarah stood up. Okay, that's enough. Get out of here before we call security. For a moment, Linda just stood there, chest heaving, eyes burning with fury. Then, without warning, she grabbed my drink and threw it in my face. Gasps filled the restaurant. My skin burned from the cold liquid, but I didn't flinch. I just wiped my face with a napkin, locked eyes with her, and smiled. That's the best you've got? Linda faltered. Security was already approaching. I leaned in. Hope you enjoyed that, because now I'm getting a restraining order. She paled. Good. The restaurant manager escorted her out, and as soon as she was gone, Sarah burst into laughter. You handled that like a damn queen, she said. I smirked, shaking off the last bit of liquid from my hair. You know what? I actually feel kind of bad for her. Why? I leaned back, stretching my arms. Because I get to move on with my life, and she's stuck in the same miserable cycle forever. Sarah clinked her glass against mine. To freedom, I grinned. To freedom. And for the first time in a long time, I really, truly felt it. Weeks passed, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was at peace. No more waking up to passive-aggressive comments. No more walking into a room only to be met with judgmental stares. No more being treated like an inconvenience in my own home. I was free and it felt damn good. But freedom wasn't just about leaving. It was about never looking back. One evening, as I was finishing up work at Sarah's place, I got a message from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Linda, you think you've won? You ruined my son's life and walked away like it was nothing. One day you'll regret this. One day you'll see what you lost. I stared at the screen for a long moment before deleting the message without responding. I had lost nothing. But Linda, she had lost everything. Josh and his mother were still stuck in the same cycle, and from what mutual acquaintances told me, things weren't going well. Josh was drowning under the financial weight of the apartment, struggling to keep up with expenses without me there to carry the load. And Linda, well, her plan to have her son take care of her had backfired spectacularly. Josh's father, the one she had drained for money after the divorce, was finally done. Apparently, after seeing how much she manipulated their son, he refused to keep bailing them out. That meant Linda wasn't just stuck in the city she hated, she was stuck there with no money, no job, and no way out. Josh had to beg his father to cover the last few months of rent until their lease was up after that. Linda had no choice but to return to her hometown alone, picking up her old teaching job like none of this had ever happened. It was almost poetic. She had spent all that time trying to control everything, trying to keep Josh tied to her, trying to push me out. And in the end, she had driven me away, ruined her son's relationship, and ended up exactly where she started. Except now, she had nothing. I didn't feel bad. Maybe for the first time in her life, she'd learned that people weren't pawns to be moved around for her convenience. Maybe she'd realized that control isn't love, that manipulation isn't family, and that entitlement gets you nowhere. Or maybe she wouldn't. Some people never learn, but I did. I learned that love isn't enough, not when respect is missing. I learned that if someone refuses to stand up for you, then they don't deserve to stand beside you. And most of all, I learned that the moment someone starts treating you like an option, it's time to make yourself unavailable. One night, as I sat with Sarah on our balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below. She nudged me with her foot. So, what's next for you? I thought about it for a second. Honestly, I said, exhaling slowly, anything I want. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. So what do you think? Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic situation? Do you believe people like Linda ever change? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories just like this one.